Welcome to this advanced training session on Microsoft Entra ID. I'm your instructor, and today we are diving deep into the core of identity management, creating, configuring, and managing users. Whether you are provisioning a single new hire or architecting an automated HR-driven lifecycle for thousands of employees, mastering user identities is your first step toward a secure, zero-trust environment. Let's get started. Let's begin by defining what a user actually is in Microsoft Entra ID. A user object is a digital identity that helps directory systems determine who has access to what. At its basics, every user is identified by a unique object ID and a user principal name, or UPN, which is typically their email address used for logging in. Why do we centralize this? Because identity is the new security perimeter. By bringing all users into Entra ID, we establish a single control plane to enforce zero-trust policies. How do these users get here? They fall into three buckets: cloud-only users created directly in Entra, hybrid users synchronized from an on-premises Active Directory, and external guests invited for collaboration. As a deep dive, always remember the source of authority. If a user is synced from on-premises, you generally cannot edit their core attributes directly in the cloud. Those changes must happen on-premises. Take a look at this flowchart illustrating the three primary types of user identities in your tenant. At the top, we have our Microsoft Entra ID tenant. Branching out, we see cloud-only users, hybrid users, and external users. Notice the boxes below them. This represents the source of authority. For cloud-only users, Entra ID is the boss. For hybrid users, the on-premises Active Directory dictates their core lifecycle. Finally, for external guests, their home identity provider like their own corporate Entra tenant or a personal Gmail account handles their actual authentication. Understanding this topology dictates how you will manage their profiles going forward. Now, let's look at how we manually create a user. What is this? It's the direct provisioning of a cloud-only account using the Entra Admin Center or Graph API. The basics are simple. Microsoft Entra requires a display name and a user principal name, or UPN, to create the account. Why do this manually? It's perfect for ad hoc creations, like setting up a break glass, emergency administrator, or for small businesses without an automated HR system. How do we do it? You simply navigate to the user's blade, select Create New User, enter their identity details, and grab the auto-generated password to give to them securely. For our deep dive, let's talk about that UPN. The domain portion must use either your initial .onmicrosoft.com domain or a custom verified domain. If your corporate policy dictates users sign in with an email address that differs from their strict UPN, you can configure an alternate login ID to provide a seamless login experience. This sequence diagram walks us through the exact interactions an administrator has when manually creating a user. First, the admin initiates the creation request in the portal. Entra prompts for the mandatory identity details. The admin inputs the display name and the crucial user principal name. Next, they allow Entra to auto-generate a secure temporary password and, if needed, assign an administrative role right there on the creation screen. Entra processes this, creates the object, and hands back the temporary password. The final, critical step happens outside the system. The admin securely delivers that password to the end user for their first login. Once a user is created, we must configure their profile. What is the user profile? It's the digital representation of the identity, broken down into categories like identity, job information, and settings. The basics involve filling out properties like department, job title, and manager. Why is this so crucial? Because in a modern zero-trust environment, this data drives automation. Accurate department fields trigger dynamic group memberships, which in turn automatically assign application access and licenses. How do you update it? Just select the user in the admin center, click Edit Properties, and make your changes. Let's deep dive into two specific attributes. First, usage location. This is a mandatory mechanical property. You literally cannot assign a Microsoft 365 license to a user until this is set, due to global licensing laws. Second, if you need to store highly sensitive data like an employee's salary band, you can use custom security attributes, which are protected by their own strict role-based access control separate from global admins. Here we have a mind map conceptualizing the anatomy of a Microsoft Entra user profile. At the center is the user profile itself. Branching out, we see the identity cluster containing the display name and UPN. Next is job info, holding the department and manager, the very attributes that power our automated dynamic groups. Under Settings, we highlight Usage Location, which unlocks licensing, and Block Sign-In, a quick toggle to secure a compromised account. Finally, Extensibility shows how we can grow the schema using custom security attributes for sensitive data, ensuring the profile perfectly maps to your business needs. Creating users one by one doesn't scale. That brings us to bulk user management. What is this? It's the native ability to create, update, or delete dozens or hundreds of users at once using a CSV file. The basics require you to fill out mandatory fields in the template: name, UPN, initial password, and whether to block sign-in. Why use this? Imagine you work at a university onboarding 5,000 students on day one, or you just acquired a small startup. Bulk operations save you from writing complex PowerShell scripts. How is it done? In the Admin Center under Users, select Bulk Create, download the provided CSV template, populate your rows, and upload it. For the deep dive, formatting is incredibly strict. You absolutely must not alter rows 1 and 2 of the template, which contain the version and schema headers. Once uploaded, Entra processes this asynchronously in the background. You don't have to stare at a loading screen. You simply check the bulk operation results pane later to view successes and any formatting errors. This flow diagram maps out the bulk create journey. It starts on the left with the admin downloading the exact CSV template from Entra. They populate the user rows, being careful not to touch the headers. The file is uploaded, leading to the Diamond Decision node representing Entra's asynchronous backend processing. The system validates each row. Successful rows flow up into created user objects, which can then immediately be swept up into dynamic groups based on their attributes. Any failed rows flow down into the bulk operation results log, giving the admin a clear error message like a duplicate UPN to fix and re-upload. Not all users you manage are your employees. Let's explore external identities, specifically B2B guests. What is B2B collaboration? It's a feature that lets you securely share your organization's apps with external partners. The basics are brilliant. External users authenticate using their own home identity provider like their own company's Entra ID or a personal Gmail account. Why do this? It completely eliminates the need for your IT desk to create, manage, or reset passwords for vendors, heavily reducing security risks and overhead. How do you add them? Simply use the Invite External User button, type their email, and they receive a redemption link. Deep dive time. By default, invited users get a user type attribute set to guest. However, if you are a multi-tenant organization, say, a conglomerate with different subsidiaries, you can actually change their user type to member. This grants them internal-level access while still authenticating against their original home tenant. Let's trace the B2B guest authentication flow. The host tenant sends an invitation email to the partner user. The user clicks the redemption link. Now, instead of asking for a password, the host tenant redirects the user back to their own external identity provider, say, Google or another Entra tenant. The user types their familiar home credentials there. The external IP then hands a secure token back to the host tenant, essentially vouching for the user. Finally, the host tenant reads the token and grants access to the authorized applications. 0 local passwords managed. To truly scale, we must move from manual and bulk creation to automation. What is HR-driven provisioning? It is the automated process of creating and managing digital identities directly from a human resources system like Workday or SAP SuccessFactors. The basics dictate that the HR system becomes the ultimate source of authority. Why do we need this? It perfectly handles the identity lifecycle. Joiners get access on day one, movers have their permissions updated when their job title changes, and leavers have their access instantly revoked upon termination. How is it done? You configure the Entra provisioning service via API to your HR system, map the HR fields to Entra attributes, and turn it on. For our deep dive, understand how the engine works. It starts with a full import to snapshot the HR database, followed by continuous, fast Delta syncs every 40 minutes. Furthermore, you can enable write back, meaning once Entra generates the corporate email address for the new hire, it automatically writes that email back into the HR system. Observe this end-to-end HR-driven provisioning architecture. On the left, our cloud HR system, like Workday, is the source. The Entra provisioning service continuously pulls it via a Delta Sync API. When a new hire is detected, the service pushes an account creation request to on-premises Active Directory. Next, Microsoft Entra Connect synchronizes that new AD account up into Microsoft Entra ID. Once the account exists in the cloud, 2 beautiful automations happen. Entra writes the newly generated email address back to Workday, and Entra's app provisioning engine pushes that user identity downstream into all your third-party SaaS applications. Provisioning creates the account, but who handles the IT chores? Enter Microsoft Entra lifecycle workflows. What are they? A feature of ID governance that automates the exact IT tasks needed during the joiner, mover, and leaver phases. The basics rely on time-based triggers reacting to attributes like employee hire date. Why use them? They eliminate help desk tickets and secure your environment. When a user is terminated, access is removed instantly with zero human delay. How do you set it up? In the ID governance blade, you build a workflow. For a joiner, you might schedule a task 2 days before they start to generate a temporary access pass, tap, and email it to their manager. Deep dive, the anatomy of a workflow is trigger, scope, and task. The scope defines who it hits like department equals sales. If native tasks aren't enough, you can trigger a custom extension tied to an Azure Logic app, allowing you to fire off API calls to external ticketing systems like ServiceNow automatically. This state diagram breaks down the lifecycle workflow timeline. It starts in the pre-hire joiner state, triggered a few days before the hire date. The automated task here is generating a temporary access pass and emailing the manager. The user becomes an active employee. If they get promoted, the mover trigger activates, adjusting their access packages automatically. Finally, upon termination, the leaver trigger activates exactly on their leave date. The automated tasks immediately disable the account, strip away all licenses, and remove them from all groups, cleanly terminating their digital footprint. Let's bring everything we've learned into a highly critical, real-world use case: mergers and acquisitions. Scenario: your organization just bought a 500-person startup. The CEO wants them accessing your internal tools on Monday. How do we do this without migrating their entire directory over the weekend? Step 1. We implement cross-tenant synchronization. This automatically provisions all 500 users from the acquired tenant into your host tenant. We set their user type to member so they feel like internal employees, but they authenticate using their existing startup credentials. Step 2. Governance. We use entitlement management to bundle all the required corporate apps into a single access package. Step 3. Automation. We build a lifecycle workflow scoped to users where the attribute company name equals the startup. The workflow automatically assigns the access package to them. The result: total frictionless onboarding. The acquired employees log in on day 1 using their old passwords, automatically have the exact right access, and your IT desk didn't have to manually create a single account. That is the power of mastering Microsoft Entra users. This final flowchart visualizes our M&A architecture. On the top left, we have the 500 users sitting in the acquired tenant. Arrow 1 represents cross-tenant synchronization, pushing them into the host tenant as B2B member objects. Moving down, Arrow 2 shows our lifecycle workflow scoping these specific users based on their attributes. The workflow then executes Arrow 3, automatically assigning them a pre-built access package. Finally, Arrow 4 shows the access package, instantly granting these users secure access to the host tenant's corporate apps and SharePoint sites. A perfectly orchestrated identity integration.